Welcome back to the How to Relate podcast.
What's going on,
Drew,
Brittany? How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good. Um, you actually came to me with this topic, and you were very excited to talk about this topic. And at
Yeah.
first, I wasn't sure. I'll be
Oh,
honest.
really? You didn't show that.
Yeah, no, because I'm very poker faced and like I'm very open to things. So even if I'm immediately like, huh, interesting.
Yeah.
But I think now after thinking about this topic, doing more research around it, I am now way more excited to talk about it.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I'm happy that you came around.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will learn in future topics that you definitely have a good poker face.
Sometimes I do. There are moments where I lose it and my clients let me know, but sometimes I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
All right. We're talking about regret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which even in that, I feel like you can maybe see someone maybe listening could maybe see why it's not, it's like, oh, okay. Because
Yeah.
it doesn't have a feel good connotation to it.
Yeah. But I will say, I think that there's a lot of temporary emotions that kind of like lead into regret. You know what I mean? As far as starting off as like a little trickle and then it leads into this like big ocean of regret. And then we're just getting lost into it as far as like disappointment being the precursor. And then eventually we find ourselves in this position of feeling like, oh man, we're just beating ourselves up and living in this regret too.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's start off.
Okay.
Define regret.
Gotcha. Um, let's see. I would say the space between a decision that one would say I should or ought to have had versus where the person is at the where the person is currently. And I would say that space is filled with perceived negative emotion that that person is attempting to cope with. And some type of distress that that person is experiencing too. And we'll kind of like get into this later, but I think that that type of distress is the stuff that makes up the regret, and that individual is just kind of like feeling saturated by that feeling too, right? I'll kind of dive into like an example of regret. Let's just use a middle school dance as an example. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So for one of the first times of you feeling awkward, right? Of let's say there's this 9 out of 10 that I want to go up and I want to ask her to dance, but I've never talked to her before. All my friends are pressuring me, and they're like, Drew, what have you got to lose? And eventually, like I potentially work up the courage, but then I back out, and then 4 years later, let's see, that would have been seventh grade. 4 years later, I don't know, that would put me at a junior in high school, and then I'm sitting in my chair and I'm staring at her and be like, wow, why did I back out on that? Right. And then at that point in time, however I'm feeling is just filtering certain thoughts that I'm experiencing, right? So I'm experiencing a thought and then I'm playing a narrative or even a melody in my mind about what that experience was like. You know what I mean? Of I really like this example. Someone was listening to Brene Brown the other day and talking about like how regret is tuned to a certain melody that is played in our mind, and that melody creates a song and then creates a narrative about what we're thinking too.
So what I'm hearing about regret is that it's almost like a longing for that we wish we would have done something differently. What maybe stops us from doing that thing in the moment is potential downside, where that's
Hmm.
rejection for if I ask somebody out and they say no, or
Hmm.
awkwardness, or feeling nervous about it, and that's what stops us from doing it. So it sounds like that there's some layers to this emotional experience of regret.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess when we're thinking about it in middle school about how intensified that is, right? And we're catastrophizing certain thoughts, we're experiencing certain pitfalls of our thinking too, right? And obviously like social pressure and like with Erickson's stages of development of like how we see ourselves and how we want to be seen. So I think that there's all these things that are combined into making that decision too. I think, and also a really important thing is how are we going to talk to ourselves after we make that decision too? Of what if I do go up to that 9 out of 10 and then she says no? What am I going to say to myself after that experience? Or even worse, what are my friends going to say to me after that experience too? Right. Yeah.
When you say 9 out of 10, are you saying that this girl is a 9 out of 10? Are
Yeah.
you
I
saying
should
that
have.
it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, nine is where I want to be?
Right. No, I'm saying the girl is a 9 out of 10. I should have used a different example, but yeah,
No, that's fine.
yeah. I'm trying to exemplify like how nervous this person should, because they're definitely shooting their shot at this point.
For sure. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's something we can all kind of relate to, especially in those like middle school awkward years. That I think I sometimes make the joke that we all never really moved out of high school.
Yeah.
That there is that high schooler, and we talked about this too when it comes to
Yeah.
teenagers, that it feels like that there is an inner adolescent person inside of us that is feeling those embarrassed feelings that they once felt, or feeling that hurt of rejection, or
Right.
peers laughing at you, like whatever it might be that someone has experienced that they hold on to. And then in adulthood, it's like, I don't want to do that public speaking thing. I
Yeah.
don't want to go up to that person at the gym. I don't want to go up to that 9 out of 10 at work, or whatever it
Right.
might be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think those are experiences because developmentally, we don't start feeling or experiencing any type of regret until the age of 7 or 8, right? And so at that point in time, that's when we start like reflecting on our own behaviors or reflecting on other people's behaviors. We start observing a little bit more and like learning experiences, social learning experiences, and things like that, right? So we're in middle school. We're pretty fresh into learning the relationship on what we're building with those emotions too, right? So if you think back on, okay, when's the first time that I felt regret? And if that's in maybe junior year, or even in middle school, about being like, man, I can't believe I didn't ask that girl to dance, right? And then depending on the melody or the narrative that you're playing in your mind, right? That sets the precedent of how you're going to establish your relationship with regret, even in the future. And now, let's say if you didn't take a job or you didn't choose the right college, or um, I don't know about other decisions that you feel like that could have gone a different way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Then we're analyzing our decision making. And
Right.
because our decision making can also be tied to identity, which when you're saying that age of 7 or 8,
Yeah.
that I think identity really start to form at that point. We recognize we have an identity at that point. We recognize that we are
Yeah.
more in control of our behaviors and our actions, and that there is that sort of like later stage childhood development that starts to occur by that
Yeah.
point before we start to hit into the adolescent teen years.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk real quick, if it's okay with you, let's talk real quick about identity. And like one of the biggest aspects of identity that kind of contributes to how we're seeing like our past decisions is especially religion, and I guess just culture in general. Um, and I'm just going to use the example of like Catholicism, just because that's the example. I mean, I don't know, that's what I grew up as, and that's probably what I have the most knowledge in too, right? Um, and I think about, as I'm reflecting, like what would have been what my relationship with regret was as far as like grace. I think about grace is something that through acts, especially for Catholicism, is something that's also earned, right? And then also going through confession, you sitting next to this person that you don't really necessarily know, but you also know that they are a segue to God, basically, right? They are one of the closest people to God that you're going to ever talk to in your entire life, right? But you also know that God forgives our sins, and the priest will, and then eventually you say 10 or 12 Hail Marys, and then you're good to go, right? But as you're sitting there and you're kind of reflecting on like, well, internally, did this feel bad or good? Or externally, I have these commandments that I know that is telling me I should feel bad about these things. Uh, versus like internally about being like, well, I know I'm attempting to live by a code as a Catholic, right? Um, how how am I supposed to make sense of bad things that I may have done to my siblings or my family, um, and anything of that nature, right? So I think religion is a big part of how we learn to make sense of past decisions or past mistakes. And if it teaches us that this is maybe not a learning experience, but this is something that you should feel bad about too.
The Catholic guilt that people talk about
Yeah.
really mm, comes into play when we talk about regret. And I think, kind of like what you're saying, am I regretting this because it's a rule that I've broken
Yeah.
versus am I experiencing an emotional sense of maybe remorse around what I've done?
Right. I guess, but that's a really good word for it, remorse. Where is that remorse born from? Is that born from an internal feeling, or is this an external source that's telling us that we need to feel bad about this?
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think for the first time that you're feeling that, that can be a really confusing feeling at the ages of 7 or 8 too.
Right, right. Because when we're shaped by our families, the bigger people around us, they're kind of our guardrails for how we need to be.
Yeah.
And because we're dependent on them for survival needs and for basic needs and for emotional needs and all the things,
Yeah.
then we do want their approval because we do heavily rely on them. And when it's like Catholicism or a sense of religion or a sense of morality or right or wrong, whatever it might be, the
Mhm.
adults around us really start to hone in on some of those, right? Your sense of right and wrong as an adult might be guided by, let's say, in this case, Catholicism, and therefore, sense of right and wrong for then a 7 or 8 year old is going to be guided by those same principles. So
Yeah.
it's like I think at that point, oh, I feel bad, guilty, regret for something I just did because I know it might disappoint the people around me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, and I think a lot of that exists outside of religion as well. Kind of going back to the 9 out of 10 in middle school of I know that I'm going to disappoint the group of guys that's around me right now. That's as we're hiding out in a middle school bathroom, as they're telling me like, Drew, you have to go and ask her to dance right now too. That I don't want to I don't want to disappoint the boys, right?
Mhm.
Um, or you're sitting in confession and you're thinking to yourself, man, I really don't want to disappoint the priest right now. And I think that's also so important too of like what's creating like a sense of normalcy in our mind too. That what is the sample size that we're attempting to make sure that that we're gaining their approval too.
Right. So I'm gonna tie this in because we both have researched Daniel Pink's work around
Yeah.
regret.
Yeah.
Listened to quite a few podcasts. Daniel Pink has a book, The Power of Regret. And he's done intense research around regret for what was it, 16,000 people, I want to say. And we'll get more into that in a second. But if it's defined as the cognitively complex negative emotion experience triggered by mental time travel, essentially, and it's imagining different choices, their outcomes, which does reveal our deepest values, which could be love, meaning growth, and serves as a compass for future action, particularly when we have the agency to choose differently. So when we start to gain more of that agency, that's when we start to reflect, what could I have done differently? And when the compass as kids is guided by parents, priests, religion, our society, the school rules, then that's going to serve as sort of the metric for how a kid's going to feel and experience and maybe interpret their own identity in that context.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess I think about the development of that compass too. Because I think in that podcast they talked about uh certain types of regret as far as educational, finances, romantic, and I am blanking on, health. And especially whenever he had uh, done that study across various countries, those were in those four domains, those were pretty much the most popular. But I think about all four of those, and those are pretty important as far as like value work for human beings too, right? So I guess when you're saying the compass aspect, I think about those four constructs of like what's building that regret within a lot of people. And I also think about um, the sample size and like the sense of normalcy that people have, that if you're a person that works in a blue collar field and chose to go into a trade, but your friends are all people who got their PhDs, right? There is a certain feeling that potentially could be born there, right?
Mhm. For
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. Yeah. That it does. Because I think that in different contexts, again, we're going to see ourselves differently in each context, where that
yeah,
is because our health is so personal to us, romantic relationships is interpersonal. And then you have like work and career, and then sort of like, what am I missing out on in terms of life and fulfillment?
yeah,
So, yeah. Um, the podcast, it sounds like that you're referring to is the Brene Brown, Daniel Pink podcast. Is
yeah,
that the one
yeah,
that you listen to? Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
So if anyone is interested and wants to kind of hear it firsthand, you can go listen to the Unlocking Us podcast. Um, but we also, and I'll put this in the show notes, so if anyone wants to kind of follow along, um, there is the regret survey. So it was done in June of 2020, so not really all that long ago. And 2020, what a year to measure regret.
Right. Yeah.
I can
That is,
only imagine how
yeah.
those answers may have skewed
Right.
once life shut down.
Right. That is, when did the pandemic start? That was March 2020, right?
March,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that was March 2020. So, and especially June, I mean, well, high school students, college students, people didn't get graduations like around that time too, right? So,
Gosh,
man, we were in
right.
the thick of it. Yeah.
We were, yeah. I mean, and also we didn't know when it was going to end. So I think if I called the year of 2020 the year that everyone went to rehab, because it does feel like that was an experiential, like you're
Oh, yeah.
reflecting on your choices in life, you're reflecting what matters, you're reflecting what kind of career you want. It was the Great Resignation where everyone's switching their jobs, people are then starting families, ending relationships. Like there was just so much happening that felt like the gravitas of life
Yeah.
really hit home.
Yeah.
Just yeah, so that it's kind of interesting. So it's it's interesting. So here are some of the questions that were asked. So the first question was, so far today, have you spent the most time thinking about the past, the present, or the future? Do you consider yourself more of an introvert or extrovert? Do you consider yourself more of an optimist or pessimist? Do your regrets mostly involve and it was finances, career, partners, education, health, family, friends, something else? Sometimes people regret what they did, their actions. Sometimes people regret what they didn't do, their inactions. Overall, does your regret involve mostly on action or an inaction? So, what do you think if you were to guess? You might be looking at it. What do you think the more popular answer would be?
Uh, I would say that since I did some research, I already know, but
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that it's inaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Inaction with 57%.
Yeah. Wow.
Mhm.
Um, Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Because I think we can kind of marinate on this for a little bit before we get to the rest of the questions.
Yeah. So how would you, I guess, what do you think is the best example for inaction versus action? I want to use something different than asking a 9 out of 10 at a middle school dance.
Well, what's kind of interesting is that what one of the most common answers was not asking someone out, not asking a love interest out on a date. So that I think is an interesting because the study is done somewhat universally. So I think that showing up as one of the primary ones. But I would
Yeah.
say that traveling and something to do with career. I wish I would have done this differently with my career.
Yeah.
I think about people who went to law school because I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of lawyers hate their lives. So, and if you love your job, I commend you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's sort of like the comedic narrative that goes around about attorneys. So but it's like, but I went to law school, and so
Yeah.
then they're basing it on, because I did this 3-year program this one time way back in my 20s, I have to study it in my 50s. Like, but the thought of the sunk cost fallacy, I think plays a role in this too, of because I spent so much time and effort building this practice that I have to stay in it. And it's like,
Yeah.
or how do you want to live the rest of your life and what you might want to guide with that. But yeah, so I
Right.
think that is probably up there too.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, and they covered this in the podcast. I really actually agree with Brene Brown whenever she says that I hear so many people in my office talk about the regret of not studying abroad in college, and taking that opportunity. Man, yeah, even my college students, my adult patients, even my aspiring college students, that so many of them share, I want to study abroad in college, right? Um, I mean, personally, I did not, but everybody I talked to before, during, and even after the experience, right? And especially in college, like your worldview is being so harshly developed at that point in time too. And I think sometimes our world also gets, um, I don't know, can also get a little smaller in college because they're like your identity is shaped by only a couple of different things at that point in time too, as you have to get good grades as a student to stay in college too, right? So then there's that pressure in it being like, is the money even feasible and all that sense. But yeah, it's just so interesting of talking to people around related to that regret.
Yeah, it is interesting because I think about travel as a part of the what kind of experiences you wanna have in life. The regret, not to requote this, the power of that kind of regret for someone might be implicated by what's accessible to them. Like if
Yeah,
the financial pieces, it's like we can't afford it, don't even ask for it. It's like, yeah, I'm just trying to survive this. Like I'm just trying to make
yeah,
it through the 4 years and then I'll figure it out after, right? So for
yeah,
that person, it might be, well, that wasn't an option for me, so I didn't think about it as a regret because it wasn't. Whereas
yeah.
someone who might experience that as an option might then say that they have regret around it. So I think that there is a perception of, was it available to me and did I take it?
Mm.
That can
Yeah.
come into play when we think about the emotional experience and the gravity that regret can have.
Along with that, I think about time and the opportunity about time versus
Mhm.
like when like maybe now when you're working in your corporate job and you only have like 3 or 4 weeks of vacation and you have to be very diligent about like when you take those 3 or 4 weeks, right? Of what that looks like versus you're telling me that I could have had 10 to 15 weeks about living in a different country. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I think about that as well as like people taking advantage of time and I think collecting data on the way and making sure you're not getting overwhelmed by that process. Because studying abroad, like, I mean, for a college student, it's a lot of responsibility. It's a deep undertaking, right? Like you're going to like a ton of meetings like leading up to that. So there's a series of decisions that you have to make. But I think the fact that you also have to be like learn coping tools along the way and organizational skills of being like, okay, how am I going to take in all this information, um, to making sure that I do make the right decision too, and that I'm prepared.
Right,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, yeah. So here's a question. When you're working with clients,
yeah.
what kind of regrets might they be talking about? And do they even say it's something that they regret, or do you think that the regret is underlying an underlying issue, maybe not the presenting problem they're saying is they're experiencing?
Yeah, interesting. I don't know. I guess I look at it as like a series. Um, I'm trying to think of a good example. Okay, I'll just use a flower for an example. So I'm picturing a seed of disappointment that starts of being like, I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't go and I study abroad, right? And so depending on the relationship that the client has with their own disappointment, maybe their own mental health symptoms or what they're experiencing at that point in time, that's and how they talk to themselves, that self-talk is either going to water it or it's just going to keep that seed dry. If it is negative self-talk and they create like more space to, I guess, play that narrative or melody over and over again in their mind, that's gonna make it grow. So eventually that seed's gonna turn into a stem. And then that's when regret starts. But I feel like regret is also the catalyst that eventually maybe is a flower is gonna bloom of that can eventually seep into shame. Instead of saying like, I feel bad that I didn't take advantage of the opportunity to study abroad in college is very different than saying I kind of suck as a person because I didn't take advantage of a lot of opportunities in life, right? As far as like regret leading it down to the pathway of like guilt or shame, or kind of like what you were saying before of feeling awkward too. If you're at a Christmas party and you're sitting in a room of people, of well-traveled people, and you're thinking back on being like, man, I would have so much to contribute to the conversation right now if I studied abroad in college, right? And so you're internally feeling embarrassed and you're thinking like, oh, I could have had so much to talk about. And then you leave the party, you're beating yourself up and you're like, that would have been a way to connect. And so I think that, I don't know, I think regret is not the worst place that a person can be, but I think it can lead to a lot of difficult places too. I'll also say this, that I used this, um, I talk about like like depressive sunglasses or yellow film glasses, that if a person is going through a depressive episode, like if it's some type of trauma or a difficult breakup or I don't know, or flunking out of school, whatever it might be, that is potentially looking at a memory through yellow film or through sunglasses, that if they're experiencing depressive symptoms at that point in time, that memory that they're holding in their mind is being colored and tinted by their current mental health symptoms too, right?
Mhm.
Which can ultimately feel like regret too.
Yeah, I mean, in the relational world, so I think about how many times you'll experience a
Yeah,
breakup and it's like, oh my gosh, that person was so amazing, or that person
yeah,
sucked, and like it'll oscillate between the like how
yeah,
good it was versus how awful it was. And it's based in whatever is kind of coming up for them in that emotional moment. So
yeah,
yeah, it's our minds want a clean cut story, and so it'll go to the all or nothing. But I think that that is important to kind of hold in the back of our minds whenever we are going through things like this. Like, hey, I'm
yeah,
feeling like really, really sad about this, and that's why I'm missing this person, or I really regret not studying abroad,
yeah,
or whatever it might be that's like
right.
really coming up for that person. Or it's hey, maybe there's a different way to see it. Maybe if I switch the lens, if I made this more malleable, maybe
Yeah,
there is like a hey, I regret not doing this, and how can I use that
yeah,
for be to be of utility rather than to be shaming and debilitating and more the anchor that's holding me back.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess this conversation is also a really good segue of like, okay, we're talking about how regret can be a pathway to like these really hard negative feelings that we may experience, right? But it's also a really good segue into talking about how do we use regret as an observer, right?
Mhm.
And learning experiences and creating distance between ourselves and kind of creating a new narrative and a new melody just based off of an awkward experience or an awkward situation, that this doesn't regret doesn't have to be um carry such a negative tone. In the podcast they had talked about like for people that might experience regret is also a superpower of also living a life of fulfillment too. That if you're not learning from past experiences, of of like attempting to be more courageous or learning from decisions or even getting out of your making a goal to getting out of your comfort zone in the future. I think that is important of like becoming a coachable adult as well, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. You're kind of more in tune with your experiences and could use as a guiding point for what you want.
right.
So what do we do with regret? Now that we feel like we're kind of hitting on this, but like, but how can we use it?
Yeah, I think the the aspect of learning, and I guess I think about like the DBT. That's a biggest thing that I think about for dialectical behavioral therapy. Uh, I guess I should back up real quick. As far as like DBT for our listeners right now, was created as to help with like interpersonal effectiveness. So like with relationships, mood regulation, and distress tolerance. So distress tolerance is the biggest one that I'm thinking about is allowing ourselves to feel awkward. So that way it doesn't become this, I guess, this bloom into the stem of and then eventually into the flower of shame, right? Of allowing us to feel awkward and growing comfortable with being uncomfortable. I guess
Mm.
like therapy 101, like leaning into the discomfort, right? So sometimes I don't know. You're gonna maybe think I'm weird for this, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll lay out flashcards like on my therapy table, and I'll have different emotions. So I might have regret, awkward, embarrassment, like thriving, nostalgia, and all these other good and bad emotions that people feel, right? And then I'll say, okay, when was the first time you experienced this? Is this the easiest? Is this the easiest to feel? Is this the hardest to feel? Tell me, and we'll go through and we'll literally walk through different scenarios and different situations, and then we sit in those feelings too, and we literally practice to build tolerance towards experiencing that uncomfortable feeling too.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, it's a, I don't know, it's a little weird. You have to
I,
you have to have a
yeah,
good rapport. You have to have good rapport with the patient. They have to learn know how to trust you. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I hear it as experiential therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Y- Deepening the emotion, holding the space for the discomfort in that experience, and that someone can be in it, and it doesn't have to be the guiding factor and what might hold them back.
Yeah. And another strange unorthodox thing that sometimes I'll do is so my I think I told you before my office is upstairs. So we have 2 to 3, maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes of small talk, right? And so we might be 40 minutes into session, but I'll refer back to the small talk that we had mentioned. Because I'm kind of different. I love small talk. And I'll say, like you've said before, about it being a bridge, right? So I'll mention that and I'll ask them like, oh, did you rehearse that conversation like before like we were going up the stairs or asking about the weather or anything like that? And so I think using that and using and talking about the here and now, like things that happen in therapy, is also a good way to realize that, oh, I don't have to feel uncomfortable about having like strange feelings in like one-on-one conversations or even in therapy too. Right.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh, Another thing they talk about in that podcast is the mystery. Sorry, I feel like I'm going on and on.
go for it.
The other thing that they talk about is like the mystery of since we're able to talk. I have the flashcards laid out, or I refer back to the small talk of it, and we're able to dissect the mystery of the bad or the negative feeling that they're experiencing. It doesn't become as powerful, right? So we're able to give it a name. We're able to deconstruct it. We're able to take agency and ownership over that feeling too, versus something that might feel positive of, and that's why journaling is so powerful too, because you're able to like understand the mystery of the negative feeling. But sometimes when we're writing about a good feeling of, if you're like, oh, I want to write about the first time I rode a roller coaster, and you write about it, and you're like, I mean, that was cool, but I mean, I knew everything that I was feeling. It was easy to feel. There was no mystery behind it, right? I think sometimes that can be really disappointing to people about being like, oh, I'm just going to get the same feeling about writing about it as I did riding that roller coaster. And I don't think there's as much mystery in the good feelings versus bad feelings. Do you agree?
I I actually think the emotions that are coming up for me are the emotions of wonder and awe,
Yeah.
and how those I feel like are based in mystery. Like when I think about people who have had transformational experiences,
Mm,
there is an element of mystery that I'm not really able to explain what it was,
yeah.
and I felt it, and I felt something shift. So I think an experience, the experience that's coming up for me around that is seeing the sunrise over the Grand Tetons in Wyoming. Like
Okay.
it was something that felt so awe-inspiring, and like I don't know why the sun is making the mountains look pink right now. I don't know
Yeah.
how it is that we're all out here and it's 35 degrees in August and we're all out here in this collective experience, but it felt like we were all looking for something and we were all there waiting for it to happen, but we also
Mm,
didn't totally, I mean, I didn't, and there, other people might have, didn't totally know what the experience was going to be, or how that I think that mystery can lie in that sense of like wonder and awe. I think that negative emotions want certainty. We want to know what's going to happen. We
mm,
want to not feel uncertain in it.
yeah.
Um, and that sometimes becomes the intolerable part or intolerable part.
Yeah.
Um, like anxiety wants certainty, or even I think sometimes sadness wants to know, when is it going to end? Like I need to know that this isn't forever. I think that
Yeah.
with negative emotions we often like kind of associate doom with it, like
Yeah.
how is this going to be now,
Yeah.
whereas I think that with the mystery and a more positive transformational experience is almost necessary for it to be transformational.
So when you were looking out at the Grand Tetons,
Mhm.
was that something easy or hard to feel initially?
I guess easy.
Hmm,
Yeah, I guess easy.
gotcha.
Um, yeah, there was anticipation. Anticipation, I don't think is like I don't know, easy, but you're kind of like, all right, come on, like what's
Oh,
gonna happen? When's it gonna happen? Come on, like
yeah.
when does
Yeah.
it turn pink? And the funny thing is about that particular moment was that we thought it was too cloudy. We thought that it was going to be that, okay, well, we're either not seeing it or we're missing it because the cloud covers were just so like deep and kind of low.
Yeah.
So I was with a friend and we were like, all right, I guess we'll just start to drive away. And then we started to see it, and I was like, we need to stop because it's happening now. So we get out of the car and then you see the sunrise and it like hits the way it hits the mountains. Everything looks pink, purple,
Yeah.
extreme colors. Like it's crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the anticipation of it was like, oh, well, guess it's not gonna happen. And I'm like, well, this was cool still. I mean, we got up early, we got up at 4 a.m. to come see this. So it was like, all right, like it's still cool. But then, that like, oh, did we miss it? Did this
Yeah.
happen? Like, what are we
Yeah.
looking for? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's funny. Uh, I guess it kind of leans into the debate of, are emotions universal? Because I can't stand experiencing anticipation. I think just because I'm not a super patient person. But I guess that's interesting, a bit seeping into the regret too, of like you being okay with the fact that I'm going to be in this like in this area of anticipation, and like I guess enjoying the journey along the way and being like, I'm not going to have this expectation that I'm going to see the pink sky, right?
Mhm.
I'm just going to practice being in this anticipation. And then ultimately, like, if I get to see it, that's great. But even if I don't, like, the journey along the way was special within itself.
Yeah, and now that we're talking about it this way, I wonder if that's part of the reason why in that survey questions, are you more optimistic or pessimistic?
Yeah,
If that's why that matters, because that's going to change the lens
for
for
sure.
how regret is then experienced, or how these types of maybe life's moments will influence
Yeah.
what regret means for someone.
Yeah. Huh. I guess I'm also thinking right now, if I don't like feeling anticipation, but I will say, I'm a huge optimist. I'm a, um, I don't know, most of the time to my fault, I'm an optimist. Um, a blissful optimist. I'm going to say that. That's a better word for it. But I hate feeling anticipation. Anyways, I want to stop talking. That's just what's going through my mind right now too.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. So I guess where should we land as far as like gaining clarity about an emotion?
Yeah. I think, okay, so gaining clarity, I will say that the resource I turn to most is Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, because I think I think the book hits on how it goes through each emotional experience and just how it lands for us. So I think that having just any sort of guide that kind of can say like, okay, what does this mean for us?
Yeah.
But I also think that the practice of presence, the mindfulness practice, which I know that people talk about mindfulness, and if
Yeah.
mindfulness, I like to boil it down to three components, okay? Because there's tons of definitions for mindfulness. These are just the elements that I like to use. Is that it's awareness, non-judgment, and curiosity. So you're just simply being in the present moment. You're just being aware. You're not judging the experience. It's not going, this is bad, this is awful, this is great.
Yeah.
It's just being like, I'm just in it. And I can maybe, and I say be curious about it, but it can be like, what is here for me?
Yeah.
And and thinking about how this can be tied in with regret. So the Stoics and the Buddhists both have this practice. The Stoics call it memento mori. And it's the idea of like you're going, at some point you're going to die. And how would you want this moment to be knowing that you're going to die? And in Buddhism, Thich Nhat Hanh will say, like, this moment's going to end. Like, it were like there are these sort of passing moments. There are these, like, this isn't, you're not going to have this anymore in the next 60 seconds, right? So,
Yeah.
and they both use like kind of similar examples. When you go to hug someone you love, be in the presence of the hug, because you don't know what's going to happen when they walk out the door. And it sounds morbid, but I think that that can actually influence how we can be more intentional, so that regret doesn't lead this like, oh my gosh, I wish I just called that person one more time and I didn't.
Yeah.
Or I wish I thought about texting them, and it's been 10 years and like it might be awkward, but so I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, okay, yeah, see a quick hug out the door, but I'm thinking about 10 other things.
Yeah.
Or it's like I can actually let those 10 other things go and just be with you as I hug you, say goodbye as you walk out the door. Like I
Yeah.
think that those types of things can be how we live in everyday moments, so that we can sort of, I don't want to say manage our regret, but we can at least do something that says like, it's, if we're saying, looking at this as like how to lead more fulfilling lives, then that might be, it's in the micro moments.
Yeah. I mean, you just went hard in the paint about like you pulled out you pulled out death. I was gonna be like,
I know.
yeah,
I
no.
know.
But ultimately, I mean, existentialism comes up a lot in therapy, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately of it being like, what am I gonna do with my time here within the world, right? And then,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot of my patients go through it's more phases of like sleeping poorly, dreaming about existentialism, like why are we here? What do I do with my time? All that stuff. So I think I think that's really important as far as like What can you do in the present day?
So what are you going to do differently after doing all this research, after thinking about and mulling about regret? Would anything that's come up for you that you want to do differently?
Like in my life in general?
Yeah.
Um, hmm. I it's funny. It's actually funny you asked that. I think about money with when it comes to regret as far as like finances. It's one of the core things that was on his study. I think about money, my relationship with money, and information and knowledge that I have around it. And I mean, I know we could talk about Brene Brown, probably too much of it being like secrets, silence, and judgment, and then regrets and what's being born there, right? Um, I think I need to work on my relationship on how I see money. Uh, and I mean, if we're looking at building goals for 2026, I think that's going to be one of my biggest obstacles is how do I see my bank account,
Interesting.
spending and
Okay.
saving methods. But yeah, but same question to you.
I think that when I think about regrets about boldness, those have been mainly my regrets. And I said this before, I've had this microphone for a podcast since 2018. It wasn't until recent last year that I started it. So I
Yeah,
think
wow.
how I want to actually be more bold and
Okay.
what that might look like for, now that we're at the end of 2025, what that might look
Yeah.
for. It could be this week, but let's be real, 2026, that's what we're going to be like planning for. So
Yeah.
that's going to be the next thing.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. All right. So learning to live boldly. I love it.
Yes, and
Yeah.
learning to live financially.
Yes. Yeah. Whatever that means, right?
Where that mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Well, until next time, everyone, stay connected.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. I appreciate it.
Of course.